Hello everyone and welcome to another story time video. Woohoo! Today I will be telling you about the other ridiculousness that is the Panzer 68. Now, this is not a tank that we have in the game, so I've actually basically gone for two replays of tanks that look the most like it shape-wise. To be clear, these tanks that we see in the game here are performing a lot better than the Panzer 68 ever would, to be fair. My information for this story mainly comes from the wiki page of the tank and the site tank-afv.com, and is basically mostly a list of ridiculous things, but honestly, this whole story is just too fantastically ridiculous not to share. So, I first heard about this tank at Tankfest when my dear friend Hugo, who you might know as High Definition, had found out about it, and he was reading me snippets from the list throughout the day, and as soon as I heard it and I heard more details, I was like, yeah, I need to make a video about that. So here we are. I've read up on it, and it's just, like I said, it's completely ridiculous. Now, the Panzer 68 was a Swiss main battle tank, and honestly, I didn't even know that Switzerland had made tanks, so that was a surprise on its own. But the more I heard about it, the more I'm just like, yeah, you understand. It was developed in the late 1960s, and despite all you're going to hear about it, it was used in the army until the late 1990s. It is dully named after the year the Swiss Parliament decided to buy 170 of the tanks, namely 1968, hence Panzer 68. Panzer, I should probably say. It was delivered in 4 different batches with some moderations in between, and in the end, of course, they had a lot more than 170. And it all seemed like a decent tank on paper. There were some minor issues, and then at some point there was a newspaper called the Weltwoche, which basically means World Weekly, and they published an article about the shortcomings. Now, in the article, the chief of the armored forces came to the conclusion that the Panzer 68 was not fit for combat. And that's obviously not a conclusion that is drawn easily or lightly. A group of experts that was commissioned to produce a report on the matter listed dozens of technical problems, and they just get worse and worse. Now, it started with the nuclear, bacteriological, and chemical protection, leaving much to be desired, which basically meant that the crew had to wear individual masks inside the tank, which of course affected their performance greatly. And that's not really ideal. You want to be able to breathe in your tank and everything. And it obviously doesn't stop there. The gearbox was so well designed that it forbade shifting in reverse while moving, meaning that the whole tank had to actually stop before it could actually start driving backwards. And the stupid thing is that I laugh at that, but it's important to remember that if that were to happen in actual combat, it could well mean the end of the crew altogether. Because obviously, when you're in a dire situation and you need to hastily back out, needing to stop your tank before you ship your gears is not really ideal. So it's, like I said, this whole tank is utter ridiculousness. And it just gets worse and worse. One of the most disturbing findings of the experts was the conception of the turret ring electrical control, which operated apparently in the same frequencies as the radios in the turret. And as a result, that basically meant that if you were using the radio at full power, the turret would start moving. And not just like any specific way, it would just move erratically. Meaning that aiming was out of the question, you couldn't shoot at a target, anything. Your turret was basically just going whichever way it wanted. Because you were using the radio. And this again would have been absolutely deadly if it happened in combat. And not only that, but avoiding getting killed meant switching off the radio altogether, which also meant that the tank would not be in contact with any other tanks, forces, or even headquarters. So basically you wouldn't be able to get orders, you wouldn't be able to get updates on what your army was doing and, well, the troops as a whole, but also commanders and everything. You would just be basically driving sort of like blind to be able to actually shoot and move your turret as you wanted to. And I have to admit that this was basically the one that loved the most. The tank would fire if you switched on the heating system. So apparently this was caused because some systems shared the same electrical circuits. But can you just imagine? You're in a tank, you're in a war zone, and it is middle of winter and you're absolutely freezing, and you're thinking, yes, let's switch on the heating system. And either the tank will fire when you do that, or you remember in time to basically unload the shell that is in the tank so that you can actually switch on the heatings, after which you have to reload the tank again to be able to actually fire when you need to. But the whole thing is just utterly ridiculous. So just to recap, we have a tank that could only reverse once it stopped moving altogether first, where the turret would move on its own if you wanted to use the radio, and if you wanted to get warm, it would shoot. So one Swiss tabloid actually wrote, "The Panzer 68 is much more dangerous than it seems." And of course that was meant sarcastically, because they weren't exactly talking about the danger to the enemies, but it was definitely a danger to whoever was inside the tank. Now, the original article by the Worldwalker, and the subsequent articles from other papers of course, actually caused quite the scandal and led to the resignation of the Minister of Defense. And Austria had originally wanted to buy Panzer 68s from Switzerland, like a whole bunch of them, and that was in 1970. And after that, the article came out, and then they were like, yeah, let's not buy these tanks. Let's mainly just like keep our troops alive, or maybe get tanks that could actually shoot. But yeah, I can't imagine why they would have wanted also. So the Panzer 68 can still be found in military museums around the world, but it is no longer in active duty anywhere, which is like a total shocker, I know. And even the improved versions were retired in the early years of this millennium. So they did still try to sell 200 of them in Thailand in 2004 and 5, but that deal, for some odd, weird reason that we can't fathom, never went through, and the remaining vehicles were demilitarized and sold for scrap in 2005. So that's basically the story, the crazy story of the Panzer 68. We do still have a little bit of replay left here, but basically the replays that we're seeing are from Sargosa and Mayo Nasal Spray, so I have to thank them both for that, because obviously I need some game footage to make a game video about a very real tank. And at first, to be honest, when Hugo was telling me about this tank, I didn't really believe him. I was like, yeah, no way that's actually real. No way that actually happened. But it did, and it's utterly ridiculous. Can you imagine this tank actually existing? Can you imagine being in the army and needing to go to war and having to drive that tank? I mean, you don't want to do that to anyone, really. That would basically be a death sentence all on its own. But like, even the tanks these replays are from, which is the Panzer 58 mods and the CS63. Like, the CS63 has its moments, but the mods really isn't that great. I can't imagine being in one of these in real life in wartime, let alone a tank that will shoot if you turn on the heating, or where you can't use the radio unless you want your turret to start moving erratically. It's insane. And I'm really glad that there haven't been active wars with it. Like, it's been in active duty and used in, of course, exercises, military exercises and stuff like that. But honestly, this tank, I'm glad that it never actually saw battle, because I would have felt so bad about for the whole crew. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the Panzer 68. That was pretty much a very real meme tank and a bigger danger to its own crew than whoever it might have faced. Now, if you have any ideas for stories that I might tell, like on tanks that we have in the game, preferably of course, but otherwise other specific tank stories, could be stuff like this, could be more specific happenings like the Ballyragged, but also like how the IS-3 caused the FV, stuff like that. DM me on Discord or join my server and talk to me there, because I love more ideas like this. I love telling stories like this. So that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be seeing you guys the next time again. Bye!